Now, ladies and gentlemen, the fourth president of the Republic of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta's politics is one very interesting one. And it is one that right now in the Kenyan political scene, the tricks that he has been doing underneath are coming up to the top surface of the layer and is being revealed to the eyes of the Kenyan people. In this particular episode, we want to put Uhuru Kenyatta before the mirror for the past 13 years that he's been carrying out his politics, but more actively for the past 3 years since 2022 to date, and how now we feel that Uhuru Kenyatta's scheme and involvement of Jubilee within the united opposition might have been a way to sabotage the united opposition, prompting including individuals like Rigathi Gachagua to now self-declare because they have realized this move by Uhuru Kenyatta. If this is your first time with our channel, The People's Mirror, then please hit the subscribe button so that daily we uncover for you stories like this. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta is a very interesting figure. More is interesting than the man himself is, of course, the relationship and the friendship that he shares with the Honorable William Ruto, the current president. Their relationship can be termed down back to the K92 days, the YK92 days in Kano, where both as was admitted by Uhuru Kenyatta, both Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto was introduced to Kenyan politics through Kano by Honorable Jirongo. Now, their relationship might have survived the storms of Kano and walked into the Kibaki era in different paths, but in 2007, their relationships almost met the same fate when post the 2007 and the 2008 post-election violence, they were shortlisted as individuals in the Ocampo 6 to answer for crimes against humanity that had been meted against the Kenyan people during that time. Now, this is a very sensitive time in the Kenyan history that most people do not like to open again, and the People's Mirror will also join that particular gap of not opening those particular wounds. But for context, it is important to understand that their battle in The Hague, Netherlands, between the period of 2008 up to the period of 2010 was almost fought jointly. Now, whereas there were accusations that were made on them individually, and whereas their acquittal from the ICC, that's the International Criminal Court, came individually, the battle to secure freedom from the hands of that particular court, and of course from Ocampo and later from Bensouda, was done together by the two. Now, this period of going through distress must have created a very solid relationship between these two individuals, so solid that they decided to form a party together and run as president and presidential running mate in the 2012-2013 elections. Now, whatever happened between 2008 and 2012 was difficult to them, both individually and very collectively. And of course, you remember towards the 2012 elections themselves, towards the 2012 election itself, there were concerns from certain Kenyans, including Kenyans that are present now and Kenyans that are deceased, on whether or not individuals who are answering questions and charges of crimes against humanity before the International Criminal Court were fit to become leaders of the country to the extent of president and vice president. But as fate might have it, the individuals found themselves free from the hands of the Hague, and this actually confirmed that they did not actually have any questions to answer when it came to the 2007 and 2000 general elections. What statement came from the Hague? The statement that came from the Hague was very clear. They said that there were no adequate witnesses to actually corroborate the claims, the criminal charges that were being meted against these two gentlemen, and as a result of that, the file were closed. Now, let's go back to 2012-2013. These two individuals hold hand through the party called TNA then, and they take power. TNA merges with the URP at that time, they form Jubilee and they form government. So Uhuru Kenyatta becomes the president and William Ruto the vice president. It was a very romantic political affair. Now, for the first term, they were very close until 2017. Then problems begin post-2017 when Ruto is seen as an individual that is being distanced from the conversation of the government. And as a result of this distancing, the person that is being pulled closer is, of course, Raila Amolo Odinga. Now, the Raila Amolo Odinga pact with Uhuru Kenyatta existed for quite some time until the end of Kenyatta's term, and during that time, it seemed in the public media, or rather it was in reality, a very hard time for President William Ruto politically. But one thing that did not happen It's just like Rigathi Gachagua was ousted when his particular contributions to the government was seen unfit, or when he became insubordinate to his boss. William Ruto was never removed from that particular position. Now at this point, even before we go in depth in the personality that Uhuru Kenyatta as a person is, it seems like a political theatrics that was created to discredit Ruto in the eyes of the public image, while support Ruto with all the machinery in 2022 elections. And this was necessary to sustain this man, Raila Amolo Odinga, who if was not sustained during that particular period, then the period between 2017 and 2022 would have been terror for President Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, if you are an avid reader, you understand how certain times kings operate. Kings have people where blames will be meted on if that particular blame was supposed to be meted on the king. And who better to serve that particular role in an hierarchy of presidency and vice presidency? The role of the vice president is to always help the president at whatever cost. So Ruto was a very good individual to actually play a decoy and to be used by President Uhuru Kenyatta to survive President Uhuru Kenyatta's term to the end of 2022 so that Ruto's term could begin. And if Ruto's term beginning in 2022 meant that for that time he had to be a rug to be stepped on by President Uhuru Kenyatta to secure the interest of Raila Odinga and of course not disintegrate the government at that time, then so be it, Ruto accepted it. But at what cost did he accept it? The cost was if Kenyatta perhaps, and this is just purely our ideology of the people's mirror and not the circumstances of the ground, but it seems so perfect that it looked that if Ruto was to bear all that humiliation for a period of 5 years, then it meant that the funding that Uhuru Kenyatta was to give the Azimio had to be doctored or played with so that Azimio does not win. Because primarily, where is election won? It's won through funding the agents so that agents can be diligent with the voting going on. And so Ruto's agents are celebrated to have been adequately paid, adequately serviced and adequately taken care of as a pre-plan, while the Azimio agents were not paid, were humiliated, and of course, as now you know in the public domain, funds did not get to the agents. Now there are two ambits to this particular funds. The funds of 2022, before we look at Uhuru's involvement now and where Rigathi Gachagua self-declared. Now, in 2022, when we were looking at these particular funds, the best way to actually manage these funds, of course, was to have someone who understands the structure and understands the need to keep family power intact. So who better than Uhuru Kenyatta to be put on top of Azimio funds? So two grounds. Perhaps funds were released, they got to Junet and they were actually used. Or another angle, perhaps funds were released, they went to Muhoho returned them to Uhuru, and Uhuru used them on Ruto, and Junet did not receive any funds. Now, if the funds were released, then they got to Junet and they were used, then a lot of people could have come forward and say that, of course, these particular funds were released, they got to Junet and they were not used, including the two individuals that Junet called to come forward, including President Uhuru Kenyatta himself and Muhoho, to come and declare that, of course, these funds were released and they got to Junet. Until now, silence. So it seems that these funds were not released to Junet. These funds were released to Muhoho, and after being released to Muhoho, they went back to Uhuru, who used them on Ruto, who had survived humiliation for all that period of time, waiting for his term to come. Now, Ruto's presidency came on a silver platter, while the Azimio were waiting for presidency because the president was on their side, and while everyone was ready because money had been given by the former president so that Raila could become the president, money only changed hands publicly, then went back to the owner and was being used in the opposite camp. Now, Ruto's presidency came on a silver platter. Babu has said it publicly a number of times that he agreed, he met Ruto, greeted Ruto, and told Ruto, umetushinda na akili. Now, that aside, let us take a look at it from that angle that now they failed the Azimio test. Who was very key in this arrangement? Key in this arrangement was, of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta himself. Key in this arrangement was Martha Karua, who also saw that when the wave was not going to their side, joined Uhuru. It could be possibly said that Martha might have known what was going on, or might have not known what was going on at all. But another very key figure, who was the CS for Interior at this particular time, was, of course, Okengo Matiang'i. So this structure perfectly had Okengo Matiang'i involved. Now let's come up to the post-2022 and now now the 2024 period, where the united opposition erupts as a result of the need of the Gen Zs. And the Gen Zs are saying now enough is enough. We want another option that is not Ruto. At this particular time, Kalonzo comes forth and say, I will support these particular children that are being shot. Rigathi Gachagua comes out and says, makes a press conference different from the president in Mombasa and says, shooting children is wrong. Now we see a united opposition that is being formed from anger, from grief that they are witnessing. If you are talking about the Democratic Party leader, Justin B. Muturi, his son was actually abducted in this particular melee, so he felt whatever the Gen Zs were feeling directly. So there was a solid united opposition that was formed out of need and out of what was happening in the country. Then the Gen Zs say, no, Rigathi Gachagua was just in the other camp the other day. Kalonzo was just with these guys the other day. We want another person that is fresh from the scene. And Matiang'i leaves a very high-paying job from the World Bank to actually come and present himself as the presidential candidate for the Gen Zs. Perfect, but who is behind him? Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta and Matiang'i math that failed Raila in 2022 becomes the Uhuru Kenyatta math that joins the united opposition. And Matiang'i comes as the option of the people and the darling of the Gen Zs. The funding, Jubilee. Where is it coming from? The party base. Of course, the party base is the Jubilee party base that is Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, before structures are put in order, the Secretary General of the party has a loose mouth and goes ahead and speaks the voice of the party, because the Secretary General position is the voice of the party, and he says, if the united opposition does not give Matiang'i this particular position, we are going alone. So they are walking into a united opposition late. They are working after the structures have been established. They are battling with court cases to ensure that they walk in timely and have a say in this particular thing. Then they walk in, and when they walk in, the first demand they want is to take overall control over the highway. Now, Uhuru Kenyatta realizes that these particular sentiments might be hurtful to his particular plan of having the Kenyatta dynasty rule this country for as long as possible. And he says, or rather he says in his mind, or no, he didn't say in his mind, this one he said publicly to the Honorable Secretary General, telling the Honorable Secretary General not to fight the united opposition and let each of them actually consolidate support. Now it's being looked like introduction of Matiang'i into the united opposition is an active plan by Uhuru Kenyatta to actually be so involved in the united opposition and to fatten this friendship within the united opposition for slaughter. I was once told a story by a mentor of mine of a story called Peace Child, of something that happened in Burkina Faso sometime in the western countries. I'm not sure whether it's Burkina Faso, but it was in the western part. And there was this Muslim who visited a community that is so hidden into this particular country that they do this thing of fattening a friend, then they eat the friend. So it's a thing where from this community you can go make friendship, you come, you fatten the friendship, and then you slaughter that particular friend, then the community celebrates you. Now this particular story of fattening friendship for slaughter was coming from a very good friend and a very senior mentor from the Kenyan political space. And so it's a mirror of what the Kenyan political space sometimes behave. Sometimes you have to fatten a lot of friendships for slaughter. And now the friendship of Sifuna being fattened to actually discredit Jonette, the friendship that is being fattened between Matiang'i and the united opposition could actually be being fattened for slaughter, either to slaughter Sifuna as an individual politically, or to slaughter the united opposition by introduction of Matiang'i. Now when Moses Kuria said that Matiang'i's face, Kalonzo's face, and of course President Ruto's face might be the faces in the ballot in 2027, then this particular story that had been building on our minds here, the People's Mirror, now connected. That these people are going to try to divide the united opposition from within, and if that is not going to succeed, then the Jubilee Party might front a candidate individually to discredit the voting bloc that is the mounting voting bloc, because the Jubilee Party comes from the mountain, and of course the DCP party also comes from the mountain. If they both front a candidate, they are going to divide the mountain, and that is going to discredit it for Ruto's win. And who is Ruto? Ruto is President Uhuru Kenyatta's friend from time immemorial. In the KANU days, they suffered together during the ICC days. They served as president and vice president for 10 years, and of course President William Ruto had to survive a series of humiliation for that particular government to survive, and is currently seeking his second term. Now, this particular system of connection might have been what Rigathi Gachagua realized within this particular structure of the United Opposition, and said that he is also a fit candidate in 2027, saying yeye ndo dawa ya Ruto. Perhaps he sees that if this is the arrangement that might be happen right now, then declaring a candidate right now might only be playing to the lap of the power makers. But waiting until 2027 might reveal more information, or might make everything naked, leaving Rigathi Gachagua now as a fit candidate to take President William Ruto head-on, or Kalonzo Musyoka. The position of Honorable Okengo Matiang'i has to be made clear in this period of 2026. Thank you for keeping it the people's leader. Until our next episode.